Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Make Shift Happen, MassBios' monthly event focused on improving equity, diversity, and inclusion in the life sciences. I'm Jason Cordero, Vice President of Business Operations here at MassBio, and I'm thrilled to be with you all today. Today, we're going to be talking about how we can change our businesses by implementing a supplier diversity initiative. It may seem like implementing a program to diversify supply is a Herculean task, especially for small companies who are the heartbeat of the ecosystem here in Massachusetts. We have convened a group of experts to help us understand that it's never been easier to take an inclusive approach to procurement. Our panelists, who are going to introduce themselves in a moment, will share their thoughts on the importance of working with certified minority-owned enterprises. We'll talk about some of the latest trends that we're seeing that impact the life sciences and how organizations, large or small, can implement a program. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to our panelists today. Peter Hurst, President and CEO of Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council. Fred Lowry, Senior Vice President and President of Customer Channels at Thermo Fisher Scientific. And Izzy Jacks, Co-founder and Principal of Conscious Customers. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. So I'm going to let you guys go through a little bit and set the stage for us and do some quick introductions of yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization. Peter, could you kick us off?
Thank you, Jason. I'm Peter Hurst. I'm the President and CEO of the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council. We are part of a national network that includes 22 other regional councils, the National Minority Supplier Development Council, 2,000 corporate members, including Thermo Fisher, and about 12,000 businesses that are certified as being minority-owned and controlled. Our goals are economic inclusion and minority business development. And we pursue those goals through certifying minority-owned businesses, connecting minority-owned businesses with corporate partners, connecting smaller minority-owned businesses with larger minority-owned businesses, providing minority-owned businesses what we call development services, which are, intellectual capital and access to financial capital and advocacy. And again, the goals for us are economic inclusion and minority business development. You'll hear me say that a lot more than supplier diversity because it's a lot broader.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Peter. Fred, you want to talk to us a little bit about yourself and Thermo Fisher?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, and thanks for having the conversation. It's a very important conversation. So yes, I'm Fred Lowry. I'm Senior Vice President of Customer Channels and President of Customer Channels at Thermo Fisher. I've been with the company for 16 years and worked in various areas of leadership here at Thermo Fisher. At Thermo Fisher, we are the world leader in serving science, and our 80,000 colleagues are wake up every day and interested in enabling our customers to make the world healthier, cleaner, and safer. We really value our partnership with MassBio through our Fisher Scientific channel. The partnership's been around since I think 2008 or maybe even before, but it's grown tremendously. We feel like that MassBio is a great partner. We want to be a great partner to MassBio and to all of the member companies where we can hopefully offer the same level of service to small biotechs that we can to much larger accounts. And I think that's the real value that this relationship brings. Very excited about talking about supplier diversity. There's some pretty exciting things that I think will come up throughout today and really enable member companies, relatively small companies in some cases, to expand economic development for minority communities. So I think that's super exciting.
Yeah, awesome. We're thrilled. We'll share a little bit more about that later on, about the partnership that we have and the work that we've been doing. Izzy, you want to tell us a little bit about Conscious Customers?
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Jason and MassBio, for welcoming me to this panel today. My name is Izzy Jackson. I am a diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice professional with a specific focus on racial equity as well as economic justice, which then leads me to being the co-founder and principal of Conscious Customers. So we are an organization that helps other companies put underrepresented businesses at the center of their spending. So really ensuring that your values are expressed through every single dollar that leaves your organization. And we do that a few different ways. So not only focusing on supplier and vendor diversity, but also having a focus on your employees as well. So how can your employees contribute to economic justice through their own personal household spending?
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you guys all again for joining us today. So I want to kick us off with a question really around how do we define supplier diversity? And what does that really mean for our organizations here in Massachusetts, these small life science companies? So Peter, perhaps you can sort of define what supplier diversity means and how life science companies in Massachusetts can really gear their businesses towards this initiative.
So it's very simple. It's just procuring goods and services from companies that are owned by diverse individuals. In our case, we certify companies that are owned by Blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, Asian Indians, and Asian Pacific folks. And one of the things I would mention is that for this industry, the life sciences industry, and in general, it's a really important thing to pursue because, as we all know, there's a racial wealth gap in this country. The median net worth of a Black family is about 12% of that of a white family, and for Hispanic families, 19% of that of a white family. And that has a real economic cost nationally. It's, over the next few years, it's going to cost us $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion. And so minority business development is one effective lever to reduce the racial wealth gap, because minority businesses, and we really need to think about minority businesses as not only including small, new, and struggling companies, but very large companies in all sectors of the economy, not only here in New England, but nationwide. Minority businesses generate economic output. They create employment, especially with people of color. They generate tax revenue. And the owners of these businesses represent a cadre of servant leaders across all communities in which they operate. So from the perspective of those in the life sciences industry, if you can create an ecosystem and an economic environment where more people have money, then it's likely that more people can buy whatever it is you're selling. So it's very simple. I'm not an economist, but it's very simple math. If you can increase wealth amongst people of color, that benefits everyone. So really, and in our case, we have a number of our corporate members who are members of the MassBios Tech Council. So they've obviously gotten this. And they realize that once they get to the revenue stage, if you have a world where more people have money, there's more people can buy what they're selling.
Excellent. Awesome. Great commentary. Thank you. And, can you define a little bit for us, and maybe you could help here, Izzy or Fred, but, what are the criteria for minority-owned business or a diverse supply business? Izzy, do you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, what are the criteria for
a minority-owned business?
Yeah, so it's all about ownership. So it's about who is the owner of the organization and how they self-identify. Again, you can't assign an identity upon a person. They have to claim that for themselves. So it's all about who they claim to be, how they self-identify. And then in terms of the minority aspect of it, it could be BIPOC population, so Black, Indigenous, people of color, AAPI community as well. And we want to include women as well. So there are multiple different classifications, but as Conscious Customers works to close the wealth gap, as Conscious Customers works to close the wealth gap, we predominantly work with Black and Latinx businesses for the particular reasons that Peter stated before.
Excellent. Thank you. So maybe, and you can build on this a little bit for us too, Izzy, is, our membership is really made up of small and emerging biotech companies. And these companies, the employees of these organizations are so passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion. And sometimes, it can be sort of a struggle for a small company to really focus on this. So, how do our member companies think about implementing these types of programs in-house, and how can they be successful?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I have 5 tips. So the way that we work is through what we call our impact cycle. And so it's first defining why. Why is this important to you? Why is it important to your organization? So why is diversity important? And then applying a supplier diversity lens to it as well. So that's the first thing that you should establish, and you should be able to communicate that well with your employees internally as well. The second step, I would say, is really an act of baselining and creating goals. So in order to figure out where you want to go in the future, you have to understand where you've been. So you have to establish your baselines, look at where you've spent, with what organizations that are minorities that you've spent with in the past, do some research, find out if they're certified through Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council. So do your research, establish your baselines, and then set your goals. And again, communicate that with your employees. And after you set those goals, it's really important to provide directions in terms of how do we hit those goals, right? You can't just say, this is our big goal, this is what we're going to do, and you don't provide any context or direction. And so you really need to look at your current existing policies in-house, and also develop new policies in terms of how you will be spending your dollars internally. So what, for your organization, who do you classify as a minority-owned business, right? Are there any exceptions to the rule? So we really have this existing relationship with a supplier, and we love them, unfortunately, or they don't identify as a minority. What do I do? Do I cut off those ties? How do I navigate that? So you sort of have to set the rules in place. And then for any great program, you have to assess, track, and reinforce. So you have to track and ensure that you're tracking to goal. You have to assess and make sure that you're doing things that are positive for your organization. And then you have to sort of restructure and remaneuver whenever possible in order to ensure that you're tracking to goal. And then the last part is to communicate and celebrate. And I think that that's something that many organizations not necessarily forget to do, but I think it's very important that you communicate your successes and you're able to talk to your employees and say, this is what we've done as an organization, and this is how we're contributing to closing the wealth gap. And these are all of the positive impacts that we're having on all of these businesses from an economic standpoint, from a tax standpoint, and a social standpoint.
Awesome. Thank you. Peter, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Izzy's right on point. I think that it's very important to have goals because accountability is critical. You need to have goals. You need to, bake those goals into your compensation schemes. So whether it's short-term or long-term, because what you measure and what you reward is what you consider important. So I really believe that whatever goals you have to push those down to the folks who are actually making the procurement decisions at your organization. And if they meet or beat those goals, you give them more money. If they consistently fail to achieve those goals, you ask them to find another job. If you don't have that level of accountability, you're always going to be chasing a ghost because you're going to find out after the fact that you missed, rather than you achieved, you exceeded. Because at the end of the day, it's very simple to do this. We can all have minority business development programs. Before I came to the council, I started and ran a couple of minority-owned companies for about 24 years. And we made it a part of our practice and priority to buy goods and services from other minority-owned businesses. It's easy to do. You just have to say, I'm going to find and use diverse vendors because there are diverse vendors in all walks of life. And the only thing that's somewhat different about us, we certify businesses as being minority owned and controlled. So it has to be 51% ownership. and the day-to-day management has to be, by a person of color. So that, and we do site visits, we have a process and criteria that's used by all of the 23 regional councils. So there's a level of integrity and compliance so that you don't have someone representing that they're a minority-owned company when they're in fact not. So it's really important to have, that integrity. And to Izzy's point, you need to measure, you need to have goals, and you need to have accountability.
Awesome. It's
If I
important.
could add one thing or just reinforce something that Peter said, and I think you also have to look at every dollar you spend. I think sometimes we get caught up saying, "Well, I can't find the company that does this thing," but you got to look at every single dollar you spend, whether it's direct materials or indirect materials, or who's doing your benefits, your legal services. You absolutely can find diverse and minority suppliers in multiple categories. You just got to ask yourself the question, and don't narrow it down to a small group, if you will.
Fred's absolutely right. And you can't just sort of, bind yourself geographically. Commerce has no geographic boundaries today.
Yeah.
So you need to look all over the country for minority-owned businesses that can meet your needs. And you can find them if you're willing to look all over the country. And you can look at non-diverse vendors. You're the client. You can say, I want to do business with diverse vendors. So even if you can't do it directly, you can do it as a tier 2 spend. Because if you tell someone, I'll give you the business only if you agree to buy some percent or dollar amount of goods and services from a diverse vendor, I can guarantee you they'll do that. So really, you have to have geographic flexibility, and you have to be willing to structure your contracts in ways that allow you to maximize the potential of doing business with minority-owned companies.
Awesome. And along the lines of those goals, Fred, you work for, Thermo Fisher Scientific, which is, a global organization. You personally are really focused on these initiatives. We've worked closely. We've talked a lot about this. But Thermo Fisher as an organization is incredibly focused on, equity, diversity, and inclusion. So can you talk a little bit about some of the things in-house? I think you alluded to it a little bit before, that Thermo Fisher has done, to lead and act as an example for the industry.
Yeah, I see. Great. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about that. I mean, recently we've done a few things that have just been announced in the last couple of months. We most recently made an impact investment, really just taking our cash on hand. And this is why I mentioned, think about every dollar you spend. I mean, we have cash on hand. We invested in banks, but we took a piece of that and invested in two different funds that are focused on developing Black and minority-owned businesses. One is the LISC Fund, and one is a fund started by the Hope Credit Union that's focused geographically in several southern states where we have quite a few colleagues. So it's like, we're doing business exactly the same way we would do business anyway, but we're just, directing some of those funds to actually make an impact in diverse communities. So that's the most recent thing. Last year, as it relates to COVID, we did a project called the JUST Project, where we provided COVID testing to HBCUs at no cost. So we stood up 8 CLIA certified laboratories on HBCU campuses and created kind of a hub and spoke model where samples were delivered to those test centers and results back to the patients within 48 hours. And quite frankly, we haven't announced it yet. We're doing a similar thing in India right now with the impact of COVID just really running rampant in India. We're providing some products and services and really funding to really support the need there in India. But then we also have a supplier diversity program as well. So we are focused on attracting diverse suppliers and doing business with diverse suppliers. And then from a channel standpoint, Fisher Scientific business, we actually provide access to our customers to those diverse suppliers. So for all of the members of MassBio, and if I can make this announcement now, I know you maybe wanted me to save it, but we're with our new relationship, we're providing a 1% rebate for all MassBio members when they do business with diverse suppliers through our platform. So you can through Fisher Scientific, you can find the diverse suppliers on our site and hopefully help you, at least from a scientific supplies and tool standpoint, help you find suppliers in those categories and support developing your supplier diversity programs.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Fred. And yeah, I mean, we let the cat out of the bag a little bit early, but I think it's
I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I think that sort of resonated throughout your whole organization and MassBio as we were working through this extension and thinking about what's important now that wasn't in 2008, 2009 when we first embarked on this partnership, and everybody came to the table. And this was a huge priority for MassBio, huge priority for Thermo Fisher. So much so they're making a massive financial piece here, which is just great. And you guys have been just a tremendous partner. So yeah, we can talk more about that down the road. But we have a program in place with Thermo Fisher to help raise the awareness and really drive an incentive to get people to change. So we hope that we can do our part. So another question here is, so Thermo Fisher obviously has had, they can have some pretty audacious goals as a large, well-funded organization, but some of our companies are so small. I think if you guys could, maybe Peter or Izzy, what is a reasonable near-term goal or objective for some of these smaller companies to make a quick impact? That they might not have an existing program. What's the first best step for them? How do they get down this road?
Pull out your income statement, look at where you're spending money with third parties on goods and services. Every business spends money with third parties for goods and services. That's the essential first step. And you'll realize there are opportunities if you don't have long-term contracts in place. There's always opportunities to switch from the incumbent unless you have a multi-year contract. And even if you have a multi-year contract, you can encourage the incumbent to spend money with diverse businesses. So it's real. It's nothing scientific about it. It's very basic. You just have to have the will from the top. It really helps if the impetus for minority business development comes from the C-suite and the board of directors, because it's easier if it flows downhill than if the procurement people or the supplier diversity people are trying to convince senior management and the board that this makes sense.
Awesome.
Agreed. I think Peter is exactly right. I think one, you do need executive leadership to commit and say that we are doing this. And then secondly, it is looking at your income. And so it's very tedious. But if there's a will, there is a way, and you'll be able to do it. And I think oftentimes people forget that you spend money on what my business partner likes to call plaques and snacks. Like those are areas where you can honestly diversify your spend. Are you sending care packages? And I know oftentimes we think of those as like, oh, those are smaller amounts of spend, but it adds up over time. And so you do just have to find those opportunities for the snacks and plaques, but also things that may be on contract up for a renewable within this year or next year, and just really getting ahead of it and starting to do your research there. So it's tedious, but where there's a will, there's a way. Look at, go down the entire list. And is it a yes? Is it a no? Or is it a later?
Izzy and Fred made a point earlier that's really important. I think it's important to look expansively at all of the things that minority businesses sell in terms of goods and services, because the minority business community looks like the regional economy in which they operate. So they're selling everything. They're manufacturing, they're distributors, they're selling services. So I think that if you think that the only thing minority businesses can do or sell toilet tissue, then you're sadly mistaken. You're missing a lot of the opportunities of minority investment banks, minority private equity funds, minority accountants, minority lawyers, minority manufacturers. There are minority folks that are doing medical devices, manufacturing those. So the minority business community is broad and deep. So you need to look expansively to capture the full opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, and Izzy, it's funny because we've had, obviously our team's had conversations with you in the past, and that this sort of the plaques and snacks thing has certainly, it's like that one just makes so much sense because it is impactful and you can do it pretty easily, and we've implemented some of that stuff here at MassBio, or if we're doing a sort of staff lunch. We're going to make sure that we're looking for a minority-owned restaurant in the area or a business, because rather than doing the same old things and going to the same old places we've always done, it's an easy change to make, and you're going to find something that you like more than what you had yesterday anyway. So that's a good way to sort of get down that path, and we have been very supportive of it. So
I love that. I love to hear that. And I think just to echo what Peter was saying, I think he's exactly right. Snacks and plaques, they're amazing. They're great. But that's an amazing starting point. And so again, supplier diversity is really an iterative process. And so starting off with the snacks and plaques, that's amazing. And then figuring out ways in which we can graduate and incorporate even more opportunities for spend, it's the way to do it.
Just to set the table, let me just quickly tell you, like, and this is only a small subset of the total minority business community in New England. We've certified 270 minority-owned businesses across the 6 New England states that have aggregate revenue of $2.9 billion. About 20,000 employees, 65% of them are people of color. So they really are moving the needle in terms of delivering economic value to this region. And the one thing I would really stress is that if we're talking about reducing the racial wealth gap, and again, we're just a small subset of the total picture, 60% of those 270 minority-owned businesses we've certified are owned by Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. And 53% of the aggregate 2.9 billion in revenues are generated from companies owned by those groups. So it really is an opportunity to make a real difference in this local economy, in this regional economy, and the national economy.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And maybe Fred, could you tell us a little bit about how your organization has benefited from the supplier, like a supplier diversity program? What have been some maybe tangible business benefits for you guys?
Yeah, the first one I would tell you has been employee engagement. It has, and it may seem like that may be a surprise, but our colleagues are so incredibly excited that we are focusing on diversity and inclusion, and that we are using our not just our voice, but using our dollars to make a difference, and not in a philanthropic way, but really in just doing business with a more diverse and inclusive mindset. So the first thing has been a colleague engagement. I've gotten more comments from colleagues and emails, and boy, I've never been more proud to work for this company type of feedback, which is incredibly important in today's world where there's a clear war for talent. This is really important to make sure that we're in lockstep with what's important to our colleagues. Secondly, we've started doing business with some really great suppliers that we weren't doing business with before. Not just because they're diverse suppliers, but some suppliers that really are driving a lot of value for the company. So expanding our supply base has been a positive as well. And I think it improves our overall employer brand. It just really says that, hey, we're a company that we want to do good things, and we want to make a difference and make a difference holistically, not just for one segment of our communities. So I think on those 3 dimensions, it's been really important. And then the last one would be there's a big focus on ESG from investors. So the investor community has really woken up to say, what's your plan as it relates to environment? What's your plan as it relates to social responsibility, and as well as governance? But this is part of it for us, is to really not just do something that's good for the company, but do what our investors expect us to do. And this expectation is growing leaps and bounds, especially in the last year. So on those 4 dimensions is really, I would say, where the impact has been.
Yeah, I think that's so important, right? Because we all want to do the right things But really, there's a tangible business benefit for organizations to diversify. And that point, we need to really focus in on that too and drive that home. Peter, do you guys have examples of other organizations that have implemented this stuff and have seen their businesses grow subsequently?
So we have, and just before I answer that, let me just piggyback on a point Fred just made. Last week, I actually made a presentation to an ERG at Fred's company. There's a lunch and learn series. And so the room was packed and they were really focused on understanding the importance of minority business development and supplier diversity. But directly to your question, which I think is a key question in terms of making the business case, at the end of 2019, we commissioned an economic impact study. And at that time, instead of having 270 minority-owned businesses, we only had 200. The study found that those 200 minority-owned businesses had a GDP contribution of $4.3 billion. They had a wages contribution of $1.9 billion, supported 33,000 jobs. And as I mentioned, at our minority-owned businesses, there are about 20,000 jobs. 65% of those jobs are held by people of color. So that really helps make the business case, irrespective of what industry you're in, whether you're selling to other businesses or selling to consumers. 4.3 billion is a significant number. And that's just a fraction of what the potential is for the minority business community in New England. There are 19,000 businesses in New England that have employees, and they have 19 billion in revenue and 137,000 employees. So the potential is limitless, and we just have to focus on, taking advantage of what's right in front of us. It's been there all along. I think we probably have not looked at this opportunity the right way. Historically, we're a 45-year-old organization. 45 years ago, everyone was looking at supplier diversity as something that was a quote unquote right thing to do, which it is. But today, when you hear numbers like this, it's something that's the smart thing to do. And so I do think that people do what's in their self-interest a lot quicker than they do what's right, sadly, but I think that's true. So I think if we keep focusing on how this is in everyone's self-interest to support, promote, minority business development, supplier diversity, will be better off, because Fred is absolutely right. Investors are looking at this, employees are looking at this, customers are looking at this. Everyone is finally seeing that there's a change in demographic that's underway in this country, and it's not going to slow down, it's not going to reverse itself. So you can either become a part of the surge or get trampled by the surge.
Excellent. Izzy, you care to comment on any organizations you may have worked with that have had a good, strong business impact?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked with organizations in the past where they treated supplier diversity as not necessarily an initiative, but it was really a part of the organizational, or as part of the organization's core values. And so every employee was a stakeholder, and every employee had a part to play within the supplier diversity world. And what we found was that as we had the employee engagement, so that was up, and as we were actually diversifying and finding new suppliers for this particular organization, it was a story that every employee could tell. It was a story that HR could use. And so they actually implemented it and embedded it in the recruiting process. And so when people came in to interview and asked about what are you doing in terms of diversity, they were able to tell the story of, yes, not only do we focus on hiring, not only do we focus on programming, but we also focus on spending. And that just created greater buy-in, saying, I believe Fred mentioned this earlier. So we are so invested in this that we're willing to put our dollars where our mouth is. And it's not just we're looking to fill a quota. We're not just looking to hire a certain number of people, but we're actually looking to make an impact. And so what we found was that it actually reduced the time to hire, because people were finding out about this organization through suppliers and vendors, due to the nature of the actual company. Through the suppliers and vendors, they were actually referring people in, like, oh, this is an amazing organization. They're supporting me. They stand behind me. They've actually, again, they've put their money where their mouth is. And so our our pipeline actually increased due to the partnerships that we've created, and then implementing the talk line of supplier diversity only helped with engagement during the actual hiring process.
Awesome. That's excellent. So can you maybe tell us a little bit more about Conscious Customer and how MassBio member companies can benefit from working with you? I know you gave us a little bit there, but are there some action items we can take here?
Yeah, check us out. There's always action items that you can take. Check us out at consciouscustomers.com. Again, we help organizations really center underrepresented businesses. And we also help your employees do so too through their own personal household spending. So we have an online platform that employees can use and punch in their everyday expenses, and we can provide recommended businesses as well as a methodology in terms of how to transform your entire budget. So not only do we do that for your employees, but we do that for you as well. The platform, not on the organizational base, but there are great resources like Greater New England Minority Supplier Development and this new partnership that we have with Thermo Fisher, where we are able to source additional suppliers as well, or you're able to source additional suppliers too. So yeah, check us out, consciouscustomers.com. We can help you build out your supplier diversity program, everything from your why to policy, to the employee policy, to the communicate and celebrate aspect of things.
Awesome. And we actually had a question, it looks like come through the chat around, how would a minority supplier register with Thermo Fisher Scientific specifically, but in this case, maybe others? Is there an avenue that you guys could assist with?
Yeah, they can just go to our website, and there's some information there in the portal. They can submit their information, and our colleagues will follow up and get you signed up. So it's just on our website, thermofisher.com.
Awesome. And Margaret, if you have any follow-on questions for that, certainly feel free to reach out to anybody at MassBio, and we'll work with our partners to get you in the right direction. Peter, can you give us some examples about how your organization connects buyers and sellers and the benefits that it can bring? And again, sort of maybe some action items for our members.
Absolutely. We actually foster two types of connections that benefit minority businesses. We connect our corporate partners with our minority businesses through a variety of platforms. We have a biweekly newsletter that goes out to 9,000 recipients. We have matchmakers, which work very well in a virtual environment where we pre-screen based on what the corporate member is looking for. We go out and do a search of our database of over 12,000 minority-owned businesses nationwide and find minority businesses that appear to meet those needs. And then that way, we're not wasting the corporation's time or the minority business's time. When they sit down and have a conversation, they at least know what the corporation is looking for, and the corporation knows what the minority business does. And we have targeted introductions to facilitate commerce. But the most important thing is that there are a lot of small minority-owned businesses that are part of our network. Of the 270 we've certified, 112 have less than $1 million in revenue. So we've created a very active ecosystem of minority businesses selling to minority businesses because the 112 only have 30 million in aggregate revenue versus the 2.9 billion in aggregate revenue. So it is very important that they have an opportunity to sell to larger minority-owned businesses as well as trying to sell to corporate America. And we have MBE to MBE matchmaking events. It's really gotten a lot of traction. But one other thing we do, which is really important, is what we call MBE development. Making sure that when opportunities arise, the minority businesses are contract ready. So it's a combination of intellectual capital in the form of one-on-one advisory services, subject matter training, focused on financial management, process improvement, marketing, and strategic planning. It's all delivered free because our corporations and our large minority-owned businesses financially support it. And that really makes a difference. And we help minority businesses get access to capital, not just bank debt, but also mezzanine capital. The Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation is one of our members, and we do work for them. We have a private equity fund that's certified as a minority-owned business in New England, because minority businesses find access to capital is one of their greatest challenges. So we really try to do all of that to facilitate making sure that when opportunities arise, they're ready. And we have these different platforms to make sure that they can connect at the right time with either a corporate partner or a large minority-owned business.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And Fred, I know we talked a little bit about the relationship between MassBio and Thermo Fisher Scientific, and really the Fisher Scientific channel. Can you talk to us a little bit more about, what Thermo Fisher is doing to encourage spend through diverse suppliers, and how the MassBio members can take advantage of it, especially this new sort of partnership we've embarked on?
Yeah, let me just start first off with saying that, MassBio member companies really get a great deal working with Thermo Fisher. I mean, we have dedicated sales reps, dedicated account managers, product specialists. You get access to our website, and most recently we just added this component around supplier diversity. So we've cultivated relationships with diverse suppliers. We've highlighted them on our websites, and created kind of a store, if you will, the diverse supplier store, where or at least you can identify diverse suppliers on the site. And when you do business with those diverse suppliers, you get a 1% rebate. So some incentive to help you kickstart your program and get exposed to some new suppliers. And it works pretty slick when you search for whatever products you're looking for. If there's a diverse alternative, the website will show you that alternative, and you can just transact just like you normally would transact. And as long as you place the order by, I think, 2 p.m., you'll get it the next day. Just like normal with free shipping on most of the products. So it should be pretty easy to use. We hope. We certainly look for your feedback, but excited to partner with MassBio and really raise the stakes, if you will, in a positive way in our relationship.
Yeah, we want to be an active participant in this as well, and certainly reach out to anybody from MassBio because we want to help work through the analysis of what your current spend may be and where there are opportunities to diversify. We want to be there along with you to make sure that the support's there. We recognize that some of our teams out there may be small, but we're additional resources for you. Everybody here at MassBio and Thermo Fisher are here to support the initiatives.
Yeah, and I would add one more thing to that. If there's a category or there's a supplier, or you look for a diverse supplier, and you can't find it, in our space, let us know. It's it's important for us to understand where their gaps are, if there are gaps, and important for us to go out and find those opportunities, find those partners for you. So we look forward to hearing from member companies of MassBio as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Fred. And part of my role here at MassBio is heading up our EDGE program, which is the purchasing and rewards for our member companies. So we're also part of our goal over the next year is to implement and sign new agreements with diverse suppliers. So we want to hear from our members what it is, who are some great partners that you've worked with that we should need to take a look at. So please, my email is always open because we want to continue to push down this road. Open it up to a couple of questions here in the chat. If you have a question, put it into the chat. So this may be better for Peter or Izzy, but how can a small company best sustain supplier diversity initiatives and seek out new diverse suppliers as they grow?
I'll answer from the perspective of someone who's been in charge of a small company, relative to some of your larger members like Thermo Fisher and Pfizer. Like I said, I ran a minority-owned bank in Connecticut. We proactively looked at what we were spending money on. Just looked at our income statement, looked at where we're spending money, because your largest expense is usually personnel costs. But after that, you'd be surprised at how much money you're spending on goods and services with third parties. And we just made a conscious decision. Wherever possible, we would try to find a diverse vendor and use that diverse vendor. So even if you're not generating billions in revenue, if you're still pre-revenue or even, modestly generating revenue, you are buying goods and services every single day. So it's very easy to make that conscious effort if you are spending money on goods and services to do it with diverse businesses. And then the other thing, what's really effective, if you're making that conscious effort, let your diverse businesses and you talk about that as a success story, because success begets more success. And it makes it less mystifying and just part of the normal DNA of what a company does. Because it shouldn't be a big deal to buy goods and services from diverse businesses, especially as the demographics of this country are evolving, and especially when you realize the economic impact that supporting minority businesses has.
The other thing that I would add to that is, in addition to doing everything that Peter mentioned, until it's everybody's job, it needs to be somebody's job. And so you have to have somebody that's responsible for moving it forward and tracking and assessing and reinforcing until you get to the point where it's embedded in your core values, where it's embedded in your company as something that is everybody's job. And if you're spending dollars, you need to consider it. So yeah, ensuring that you have someone designated and assigned on working on supplier and vendor diversity.
I would just, if I could on this one, I know it's not for me, but I would just reiterate the point that Peter made earlier, something you got to measure. You got to measure it, and you got to hold people accountable at multiple levels. And just like everything else in our businesses, whatever we measure and hold people accountable to actually improves. So you have to have if you want it to sustain, you have to have the same commitment that you would on any other dimension in the business. And it will sustain. As a matter of fact, it will do more than sustain. It will grow. So I think that's really the key, and that's the way I think about it.
Excellent. Well, it looks like we have time has flown by, and we are up against the end of this. So I just want to say again to our panelists here, Peter, Fred, Izzy, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was just a wonderful conversation. We encourage all of our members to go out and work with the partners here today. There's a ton of valuable resources out there with these folks, with ourselves at MassBio. Again, we want to be an active participant in this and work with you guys to make sure that our members are going down the road to success. So I will say thank you all again, and let's have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.